Welcome all. I think we'll be serving tea in a moment. It's Sunday, May 11th, 18th, May 18th. And we're here at Atlanta Soto Zen Center. This morning we're doing a community interview, a very interesting person, Bryan, Chishiki Bryan Price. And Bryan is going to tell you most of his story, but he's a psychiatrist. He works primarily still in prison, inmates. And he's been practicing with us for how long? Maybe
It's about 2011.
2011, and owns the farm watershed where we hold our retreats. If you've never been to Watershed, you really want to go. It's a beautiful place. The next retreat is June 11th, which is a Wednesday, through the 15th, which is a Sunday. I will be leading that retreat, so it will be a Dharma style retreat. There'll be more. Bryan does a follow-up retreat. Typically, we were washed out in April. Yes, it's April. So we couldn't have my retreat, and he does a follow-up silent retreat. And the next week, same day as Wednesday through Sunday. So if you have the stamina and the bandwidth, you can go to both. I don't think there are any more announcements are necessary. I'd simply like to introduce Bryan. Ask him to start.
Hey,
We'll start
I
here.
feel strange with my back to the crowd and my face this way, and I can't see anybody on the screen, so it's just you and me looking at each other.
That's good. Focus on it.
Uh, where should I start?
Well, I will do the interview, but I just wanted to ask you, do any opening remark.
Um, well, since they asked me to do this, and I initially said no, because I thought, interview style, I don't know. Nobody really wants to hear a backstory, and I think somebody else said, that's then, this is now, and I think Zen really focuses on now. But I agreed to do it because since they promised he would make it interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't feel any pressure on myself anymore. I don't have to make it interesting, but I also will try.
I will try, but
I will do my best.
look what I have to work with.
I know. Well, what are you going to do?
So 25 words or less, not the white picket fence bit, but just tell us a little bit about how you grew up,
I grew up,
where, some about your parents and you.
I grew up in Winter Park, Florida, Central Florida, right next to Orlando. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm an only child.
Did you go to Disneyland?
You said 25 words, so I went to Disneyland. I didn't go every weekend like most people assume because I grew up in Florida, but I went a few times.
I've been to Orlando, but I did not go to Disneyland. I went to the original Disneyland before it was even completed in California. So, what'd your dad do?
My dad was a dentist.
Hmm?
My mom was a real estate agent.
Oh, Florida. No, in Florida.
Yeah, they divorced when I was about 10.
Republican? What? We don't, but
Florida.
Florida. So, tell us a little bit about the next phase. Where did you go to school after high school?
Yeah, after high school. So I finished high school at Winter Park, Florida, and then I went to college at Furman. Had taken some psychology classes in undergrad or psychology classes in high school. I had a pretty big high school,
Hmm.
and
It's unusual.
went to Furman to be a psychology major.
Furman is in Florida.
Furman's in Greenville, South Carolina.
Hmm.
Little liberal arts school. Had about 2,400 students when I was there.
What was that like?
School was hard for me. I struggled in high school. I struggled in college. I struggled in med school. I struggled all the way through. I mean, it takes a lot to get something in here.
Hmm.
So,
It was hard academically.
yeah, academically it was hard. I mean, Furman was great. I mean, all the experiences were great, but school wasn't ever something that was easy.
How was it socially?
It's a small liberal arts school in Greenville, South Carolina, in the um, late 80s, early 90s. Greenville was sort of nothing. I think there was one restaurant downtown at the time. It's a lot bigger now, but socially it was good.
I went to Illinois Tech. There were 7,000 men on campus, 70 women from Chicago. They would bus in nurses from nursing school, and we'd all be standing in the parking lot, a line, bus would pull up, and all the girls would get up, they're staring at each other, trying to figure out what to do. So, wasn't much socialization going on there for me. So, Type 101 I took at Illinois Tech. And, a teacher had written a textbook, and the publisher had republished. And we had to read it in the original order because the teacher would just get up and drone on for an hour, and everybody in classes at the auditorium, everybody's falling asleep. I thought it was horrible. I thought Psych 101 was going to be the most interesting course. He somehow made it almost inaccessible.
Yeah, I think,
A lot of charts.
I'll back up for a second and just say, as a kid, as an only child, I think I had a lot of time and I was really bored. And one of the things that really concerned me is, what are we here for? What is this all about? Why are we here? What are human? What is this?
Wow.
And I stumbled across a book, my grandmother's.
You didn't have a childhood. No.
Yeah, I had a childhood. I did all that stuff too, but I stumbled across a book on my grandmother's bookcase called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck, which was like a famous, one of the first self-help books, I guess, back in the 70s. And I didn't read it when I was really young. This is like probably when I was a teenager. And I just remember kind of filing that away in the back of my head thinking, that guy really knows something. Like, he seems to know something. The chapters were very simple. It was like work and love and discipline. I haven't gone back to read the book, but he was a psychiatrist. So I thought that's how I got interested in psychology initially. Took a couple of classes and then thought, maybe that's the way to figure it out. Maybe major in psychology and try to figure it out that way. But as you discovered in your intro book, it's a lot of behaviorism, and it's a lot of, working with rats and trying to figure out what motivates rats and other things. And I mean, I think it was really helpful. Psychology was interesting, especially abnormal psychology, which got me thinking about psychiatry. And of course, Scott Peck was a psychiatrist. So I think the overarching theme is sort of like, where can you figure this out? Like, how do we figure this out?
Yeah.
Like, what is this? What is this life about?
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, was kind of the driver, maybe a little bit more interesting than just the sequential stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting that you got into that as a child and that frame of mind. I mean, as a child, I think a lot more people do than we imagine. Um, When did you first stumble across Zen? Was it in a book?
Um, yeah, so I learned transcendental meditation when I was in um, med school. My mom was like, this is kind of hard for you. Maybe TM would be helpful. And she had a friend that was a transcendental meditation teacher. So I took a TM class. That would have been in the early 90s.
It's still at Furman? You guys said
No, this was at Marshall in Huntington, West Virginia. So I went to med school at Marshall, which is where my mom lived at the time. But took a transcendental meditation class. It was useful. I mean, I stuck with it for a while, and then it kind of got filed away, and kind of life got away from me, and went through residency. And um, I was down in Noonan, Georgia, and I was taking an Aikido class, and I was reading about the founder of Aikido, who was this guy that they called O-sensei, and he was a Zen practitioner. And I thought, that was the first time I remember having the thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting if you could kind of integrate your life, like your work and your social life and your marriage and like this first, I think that's when it first hit me that maybe there was like some kind of through line, and maybe meditation could kind of tie it all together.
Yeah.
And so that was the first place I ran into it. And then I read Brad Warner's book, which I found in a used bookstore, Soto Zen. And that's the first time I came here. So I read that, and I thought, okay. And I started meditating a little bit, and I thought, I need to come to the Zen Center. And I was living in Noonan, so I drove up here a couple of times, but that would have been probably, you guys were in this building, so I don't know exactly when it was. It was before I started coming regularly in 11, probably 2009. Yeah, it was like the first time I came here.
Did you ever meet Brad? He'd been here a few times.
I never met him. I think he was here while I was here, but I was out of town or something like that, so I missed
He
him.
was here in 2010 for one.
But I remember coming here, and then you guys chanted the Heart Sutra in English, and I totally and then you had a potluck afterwards, like you invited everybody else to lunch, and I was like, no, I'm sorry, no ears, no eyes, no, like none of that. I was like, that's too weird for me, so I left. And
Explain that a little. You've told me this story, but tell everybody.
Yeah, no, I came here the first time, and it was like
first impression.
Yeah, first impression. It's very dark. Everybody's looking at the floor. Nobody's making eye contact. You sit facing a wall. And I'd read about Zen, and I thought, oh, I kind of know what I'm getting into. And I got here, and I'm not saying that the Zazen was bad. I'm just saying that after I got up and we chanted in English, I thought chanting in English is so weird. Like, first of all, it's weird that you're chanting in English. Secondly, I have no idea what all that was about. And I was like, I don't know. If lunch is anything like that, I got to get out of here. So I took off and I came and I read a little bit more and then I came back again maybe 6 months later and I think probably the same thing happened and it took a while for it to stick. But I will say, yeah, I mean, how did I end up really coming here? Like in 2011, I think the Dalai Lama came to Emory in 2008 and I took a friend of mine and went to see the Dalai Lama, and it was kind of a repeat of M. Scott Peck and lots of other things. I was like, that guy knows something. That guy definitely knows something.
Seems to know something.
Yeah. And there was somebody else on stage with him. They had like a little round table stage, and one of the guys on stage was one of my mentors in medical school. And I was like, that guy knows the guy that knows something. So I set up a meeting with him, and I said, they just finished a pilot study that involved meditation. And I said, I really want to, I was like, I'll volunteer, whatever, just get me involved in it. And he said, okay, that's great. Glad you want to do it. And he sent me I went to Ithaca, New York and went on a retreat with a guy named B. Alan Wallace, who was teaching shamatha meditation. Mm-hmm. So in Theravadan tradition and the Tibetan tradition, they break meditation into shamatha and vipassana meditation. And he was teaching a retreat in shamatha meditation. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. So I did that retreat, and then I came back and I taught one of the arms in the study. So the arm in the study had 3 arms. So one of the arms was a control group. The other one was this, like I think a calm. So it's like a compassion and longitudinal meditation, I think was what the acronym was for. But they had 3 arms for the study, and one of them was like shamatha meditation, which is pretty similar to Zazen in a lot of ways. And then the other one was like a compassion-based meditation, and they were trying to show differences and did a bunch of physiologic tests of people beforehand and afterwards. So for a couple of years, I taught that. And then I went to a retreat with B. Alan Wallace for about 6 weeks.
You say you taught that type of meditation for a while?
Yeah, well, just to the people that were in the study.
Oh,
yeah, the people that were in the study, and I had come here and left and come here and left, and I wasn't coming here regularly at the time, but I taught some of the people in the study with another guy that became a friend of mine. And after that, I was kind of burned out at work, and I decided I was going to quit work, and I'd started to work in a jail and was doing corrections work. I'd been doing private practice before, so I quit that and went on a 6-week retreat in Thailand with B. Alan Wallace. And when I came back, I just started doing corrections, and that's when I decided I need Sangha. I need to go back to that weird place again. So I came back to the weird place, and I've been coming here for a long time. It's still pretty weird, but it's okay. It's all right. I just try not to be weird. Like when I see other people that are new, and I'm like, just don't be weird, because they might leave for a year and a half, or they might never come back. Don't be weird. But it's hard not to
less
be
weird than it is, but it's not easy. I think you're back to your college days for one thing. I was in design. I was in design school, and so our electives for credits, were all the easy courses. They didn't expect you to take physics or, it's Georgia Tech engineering school. People still carried slide rules at that time in a holster, and so one economics. There was another course that I took, and it was a wonderful, entertaining course the first thing in the morning, but it wasn't about anything practical. There was nothing about balancing your checkbook or anything like that. It was all world scale.
Sounds like being a psychology major. Nothing practical about actually living your life.
And then one course I took was in Chinese literature, and the guy who taught it was half Chinese, half American. Big guy, big Chinese guy, Chinese American guy, and he was able to get books from mainland China at that time, which was communist, and in English. And one of them in particular, I think it was called The Riddle of the Red Dust, was this story about a family. And it starts out, and people come and go, people die, people are born, storylines are developed, and then that person disappears out of the text. It just went on and on and on and on like that forever. It was like, it ended up someplace totally different than it started out. It had no rhyme or reason from Western storytelling format perspective, and that was sort of a mind blower for me. And just to see there's such a difference in culture, there's such a difference in attitude about how a story is told or something like that.
Well, I think, Alan Watts has a great bit on this, really. I mean, he's kind of a spiritual entertainer in a lot of ways. He's a really interesting guy, but he talks about like how in Western society everything feels like it's building up to something, right? Like you do this thing and you go to high school and then maybe you go to college and you got 4 more years of this and then you're going to get married and you're going to get a job and then that's going to happen. You're going to turn the corner, then everything's going to come together and it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And then he's like, and that's it. That's what happens. Like you never arrive. You never get there. And it sounds like the story you read, like the story you read was like, and you never get there.
You never tie up any loose threads. Just never come back together.
Well, I think that's the interesting thing about Zen, right? Because I think the way our minds work is, at least Western minds, it feels like if you just get the pieces right on the board, then everything is going to work out.
Yeah.
And it's like a rolling, moving, never arriving, here we are kind of thing, more like the Chinese story that you read.
One of the points I make in my book, conclusions drawn in Zen, is that reality is inherently inconclusive. That's the conclusion.
But I mean, I think once you start to once you start to realize that, and I don't know whether that comes with age or whether that comes with practice or maybe both, that there's no arrival, you don't ever get anywhere, then you stop. Maybe you don't stop. I think we're just inherently designed to try to change the pieces around on the board and to think about the future and try to get this, and fear and craving and all this stuff just kind of keeps all that going. But there's a point where you start to realize that that's just the way it is, and that the solution to this problem, there is no solution to this problem, but that maybe kind of that framework maybe isn't exactly right.
For the same reason, that's why design was appealing to me, because design is a matter of problem definition, problem solving, but you never have the perfect solution. It's always an evolving process. So, for instance, they give you an assignment to design a chair. Do we really need another chair? No. But that's not the point. The point is to design a chair and have it be significant somehow, even though there are millions of chairs on offer already. Right? It's the process. There can always be another chair, and what you do with it is creativity. I think the same with Zen. Zen is the same for everybody, but it's absolutely different for everybody. Everybody has to reinvent. Everybody has to find it.
Well, an interesting thing to me is that when most people come here, including myself, you don't come here because things are going well with changing the pieces around on the board. You come here because something isn't going well, or you're starting to realize that maybe the framework that you're in or the framework that you're working with, something seems a little bit off, and maybe you can come here and fix the pieces on the board. Right? At least that's the way I was. You come here and you think, well, if I add meditation, then maybe that's going to allow me to like not be so bothered by all the stuff that's on the board. And it's not that way at all. But
what way would you say it is?
I think that the frame is, I mean, I think that, we have the way that our mind works, we have a framework, which is our whole history and like everything that's ever happened to us and all of our relationships and, how we interact with the world and how we interact with our job and how we interact with other people. I mean, like, the whole thing is this framework, and it's influenced by what's happened to us in the past. And I mean, I think even psychology and psychiatry, the idea is still to try to change the way that you relate to how you think about the world or how you think about the pieces on the board or how you think about all of this. And Zen is totally different than that. Zen is like, let's figure out what this whole framework is. And let's see what happens. And I think when you sit in Zazen, suddenly a lot of that stuff falls away. And it's like that, the questions that you have, and again, the questions that sort of drove, like, that guy has something figured out, I'm going to go see what he has to say, or that person has something figured out. Those questions begin to kind of fade because they're part of this whole framework.
Right.
And I don't think that having, I don't know, but I mean, my assumption is that whatever realization you can have it's a realization that it's not really, you're not going to figure this out. You're not going to turn a corner and suddenly be like, now I got it. But my mind from the very beginning has been, I'm going to go around this corner and I'm going to go figure this out. I'm going to go, get interested in sort of thing.
Fundamental research approach.
Yeah.
You're looking for findings and draw some conclusions and maybe make recommendations to others or to yourself on how to see. But I think Zen goes beyond that into what I would refer to as implications. but implications not only for you personally, but for the society and so forth. And that's true of any philosophy or any movement. And I think attitude adjustment is another one you have to throw in there because it turns out we're getting in our own way mostly. And so it's our attitude that has to be adjusted to kind of the way we're approaching everything. It's just a thread running through Tolkien's teaching.
Okay. I think there's a lot of suffering that can be alleviated by changing the way that we relate to our thinking and maybe the way that we relate to the world and the way we relate to other people. And I think a lot of that is on the board still in the frame. It's still in the frame. Like, there's a lot of stuff that can be done in the frame, but like to maybe not even ultimately real. Again, I'm talking above my pay grade, but I think that there is something that is beyond that frame. And I think that's kind of what you get into when you get into Zen. So a lot of times I remember in the beginning when I would come here and you would say Zen is not therapy, Zen is not psychology. I would get a little irritated by that because I would want to integrate that into psychology because I was teaching meditation, a lot. And I got irritated and, I was thinking, well, there are a lot of books in there that are like Zen and psychotherapy or whatever, like a lot of people.
But Zen and psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Zen is psychotherapy.
Well, I mean, I get it, right? I mean, I think it's helpful, and I think but I think it's totally different. It's a totally different way of dealing with reality than just trying to understand the frame better, or maybe maybe it's understanding that there is a frame, right? It's seeing the frame and then realizing that there's something other than just changing pieces.
I think we can honestly say that Zen is therapeutic, but it's not a therapy as such.
Yeah.
It's like a prescription for practice, attitude toward the world. So, but that class. So what I
trying to get away from the boring part.
It's not boring. Well, it was boring at the time. So, what are some of the electives that you took, and did any of them have any effect on you?
We had a lot of general education requirements at Furman in addition to our major, and the problem I had is that I wanted to go to medical school, so all of mine were sciences, except for two. And the only only other two electives I took, one was the first term I was in college because I was terrified and I thought I was going to fail out before I even started. So I took military science, which was the easiest class in all of Furman. And then the second only elective that I had the whole time I was there that wasn't a science or something else related to general education was philosophy. Yeah.
So how did philosophy impact you? Maybe you're well positioned to do that. Tell us the difference or the comparison between what philosophy and psychiatry.
Philosophy and psychiatry. Well, I think
25 words or less.
I think philosophy used to be like psychiatry. I think the early philosophy, and I don't know a lot about philosophy, but it seems like early philosophy, especially like when you talk about like, well, maybe way early, but I mean, I guess I'm thinking more like existentialism and stuff like that. I mean, I think that dealt more with like, how do you live your life? And I'm not sure, I guess philosophy still does. I don't know. I only had one intro class. I learned as much in that philosophy intro class as you did in your intro to psychology class. But I did take it. And it was interesting, and I thought, maybe I'm on the wrong tracks, but I was too far into it at that point.
I think I probably told you the story. Diane won a set of books, Encyclopedia Britannica, great books. It's all Western philosophy, starts with Plato and ends with Freud. And it's just sitting on the shelf there, and I opened them up one day, and it smelled like smoke. Whoever owned them before was a smoker, obviously, which I like the smell, but I don't like smoke. But so I started reading them, and they had a 10-year plan for reading. You didn't read them in order. They sort of took you through a conceptual way of interrelated things. I was really surprised to find out that Socrates' Apology, I think by Plato, where he confesses he's thought to be the wisest person in the world, the oracle claimed him the wisest persons, and he claimed no wisdom. And he also visited all the other wise pundits of the time and said they didn't have any wisdom either. That's what got him in trouble. Yeah. And so I thought that was very Zen. Western philosophy, some of the fundamental attitudes or some fundamental aspects of it seem very Zen to me.
Well, probably, well, no, I didn't read that whole, encyclopedic philosophy class. My guess is it probably, to answer your question, I think philosophy has more to do with just sort of how to live a life. And I think psychiatry is more like if you're, the whole diagnostic and statistical manual used in psychology and psychiatry is all about mental illness, right? What defines the mental illness? Well, you have significant struggle and it's interfering with your life, right? well, does life interfere with your life? In other words, I think when it's getting in the way and it's really causing a problem, then people go to a psychiatrist. When you just have bigger questions, like some of the ones maybe I had when I was younger, like what is this all about and what are we doing? It's more of a philosophical question than a psychiatric question.
I think the other parallel, we do what we call Dokusan. It's an interview. It's not meant to be therapy. It's not meant to be an advice column. It's not meant to be any of those things. Just listening, seeing where a person's at, and kind of responding from a Zen perspective, hopefully from Zen experience. So you've done Dokusan, and we've done Dokusan. So how do you see that relationship? Kind of counseling or whatever you call it, we do, as compared to what you do with your
I think
patients or clients.
ideally, I think Dokusan is a conversation about this, and I think you tell me. You shouldn't be asking me this question. I should be asking you this question. But it seems like the teacher's job is to sort of point the student back to himself, point back to what's being, talk about practice and see if.
What self are you talking about?
Good question. Now we're back to Zen. Probably not the self that we talk about when we talk about
The
psychiatry.
beauty of it is I'm not responsible.
Yeah.
So you can't blame me for whatever happens.
Yeah. We're all responsible for our own practice, right? But I think you're like,
licensed.
yeah, right, yeah,
They come after you.
yeah.
We'll go back to your first experience here and try to go beyond your first experience here. What brought you back and when did it seem to work for you?
Well, that's a good question. Is it
What do you
working
mean
for me now?
Right.
So that was like 2011. I moved to Atlanta around that time, which made it a lot easier to come here. So I started coming regularly, going to session, started doing retreats. Did it stick? I don't know.
You were, in residency for a while too. We can talk
Yeah.
about that later.
Yeah. So I was a resident here in like 2015, 2016. And I guess, I long story, which I won't go into, but I bought this piece of property up in North Carolina in about 2011, 2010, 11. And we started having retreats up there like 2014-ish.
I went up when you were renovating the place. I walk into the kitchen.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the kitchen is a table saw.
Yeah, yeah.
These two guys are cutting a piece of wood, trim to put in by eye. They've got a pencil line drawn on it. There's no controls or guides or anything on the saw. There's like eyeballing it like it's on a table saw.
The whole place still looks like that. So it looks like it was eyeballed from the very beginning.
They were good. You have to be good to do that. Yeah. To do that way.
But your question was, when did it stick? And I don't really know. I think it just sort of, I just started coming. I
Like a virus. It's like a virus. You don't know you got it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what happened. It just sort of soaked in. And I think every time you sort of pull back from coming to a place where you have Sangha or you have good association, it's hard to do it on your own. We have a little bit of external motivation when we come to a place like this. And I think listening to Dharma talks and all that, I think it's motivating to continue sitting when it gets hard, because I think it gets harder.
At the crux of the question there, and from a psychiatric point of view, I would like you to explain why it is so difficult to sit still by yourself at home and do Zazen. What makes that? It's the simplest thing in the world. Stupid simple. Well, why is it so difficult? How? I shouldn't say why, maybe we don't answer why questions. What makes it so difficult? Psychiatric perspective.
I don't know from the psychiatric perspective. I know they talk about, I think this is Theravada. Where do they talk about the five hindrances? Where is that? I know it. So the five hindrances are basically, I think these are the five hindrances to practice, but they're also the five hindrances really to meditation. But it's basically too much thinking, too little thinking, meaning that you're falling asleep, too much craving, too much aversion, and doubt. And I think that it's worded differently than that, but that's kind of what it comes down to. And I think what makes it hard to sit is you're stuck in one of those things, right? So you're either you're too much activity, meaning your mind is racing, and then you think I need to be doing something other than sitting here, or your mind is dull, and you're half falling asleep. And I guess you could sit there for that as long as you can
Yeah.
sleep sitting up.
Yeah.
And then too much aversion, like this hurts too much, it's too painful, I don't really want to be doing this. You're resisting it. Too much craving, which I guess in this particular context, it would be wanting to get something out of your practice. You want something out of your practice and you're not getting it.
Yeah.
And then doubt is, this just isn't working. This isn't for me.
Yeah.
I'm just a normal guy. This isn't for me. What am I doing here?
Yeah. In my book, faith, doubt, perseverance. So my view of doubt is, from experience really, is that doubt is the emotional content of faith, trust. And so the more doubt you feel and you persevere, the more faith you're applying, the more faith you're activating, the more doubt you feel. Just like courage is not the absence of fear, it's high threshold of fear. You run into the burning house to save somebody. It's not the absence of fear. But that's a relatively radical perspective, but it's the Mokara, it's the resolution of opposites. Doubt is faith. Faith is doubt. Super.
I might come back to why people keep coming back. I think that there's an inherent knowing that if you start to have doubt, that you need to bolster the faith. And I think coming here, hearing Dharma talks, and being around other people that are supporting your practice, I think it begins to like.
Oh, I thought they were coming because of me.
Teachings. The Dharma. Yeah.
I think people do come because of the example of others. I mean, Bill, you've been here over 10 years. On time.
Blank.
And you come back and see the same people still here, still working at it. Very encouraging. We say psychologically supportive to you to sit with a group, even though you don't have much of conversation. But really not a normal relationship of any kind.
I mean, you mentioned doubt, and I think doubt is part of it. I don't know. Maybe with me, I was going to say, I would be surprised if other people that are involved in the practice don't have a lot of doubt at some point. I don't go through sort of like that night of the soul kind of a thing in the middle of all of this.
I'm pretty sure Buddha was at the end of his rope. He resolved to sit there and die, so he was suicidal. That's pretty doubt. That's all we doubt. But classically, there's two kinds of doubt in Buddhism, like probably two kinds of anything. One is insidious doubt, where you doubt the teaching, you doubt your teacher, you doubt something, you're projecting the doubt onto something. And it can be self-doubt too. It can be insidious. You can be so self-critical, self-loathing. Zen may work, but I'm no good. It can't work for me, that kind of thing. And then there's great doubt. Great doubt is the accumulation of the question, you could say. It's the accumulation of not knowing, the don't know mind, until the entire universe is just one question mark. And you don't know the answer, and that's fine with you. So I think we get confused that we're finding an answer in Zen. But in Taoism, we say, caught by desire, we see only the manifestation. Freed from desire, we confront the mystery. It's not like an answer, it's more like a deeper question. I think that's important. In science, they say that too. We say the great scientists ask the more bigger questions. Mediocre scientists ask small questions.
I think, you said Zen isn't working for me. I think a particular idea can lead to a lot of doubt, because I think Zen isn't going to work for you. It's not going to work.
Nothing else.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the whole pieces on the board thing, right? You think that this is going to help you adjust the pieces on the board, and then maybe in some ways it's working in a way that you're not even aware of, and then all of a sudden Zen, something happens, right? Maybe big loss, maybe big pain, and then Zen isn't working anymore.
That's right.
And then that's the insidious doubt, and then people, I'm not going to say people, I'll say that's when you come to these inflection points where you're more likely to walk away.
So why me, Lord? Job lament. And then Zen is, why not me? What's so special about me that I should not be subject to the same slings and arrows as everybody else?
It's that you think you should be handling them differently when you're practicing. I think. For me, I feel like when the slings and arrows come, if you're practicing regularly, you feel like you're going to be handling it in some certain way, and that's the expectation that
Yeah.
and that's an interesting experience, right?
Yeah. Zen's answer is those high expectations you're building don't have any. So what are you left with? I think you can have a workaround this. It's an aspiration. We hold an aspiration to something. We don't know what it is. Point is, we don't know what it is. If we knew what it was, it would be an expectation. And then when we get it, we might be disappointed because now we've got it. That wasn't it. Or we may not be happy with what we get, didn't meet the expectation even, let alone some higher aspiration. But that's just word games.
It's all just word games, isn't it?
This is,
Yeah.
no. What are words for? What do words do?
Context, yeah. And talking Zen, yeah. Just trying to point to it, right? But what is it? And that's you can't talk about it. You can't explain it to it.
Do you remember what I quoted yesterday morning at the break between the two sessions?
The piece of the
Precious mirror. Yeah. Although it is not constructed, it is not beyond words. Like facing a precious mirror, form and reflection behold each other. You are not it. In truth, it is you. That's that's pretty good use of words. So let's break for a moment. No stretching or anything, but see if some of the audience has questions. Not that your audience don't. That's not a pejorative.
Yeah, down.
We're all performers. Okay. In your own movie. You're the star of your own movie. Questions for Bryan?
Years ago, how you it's not consistent the professional career. Especially you mentioned earlier that you're working with prison inmates and U.S. action in that field. I'm wondering what those two roles there with one another.
That's a good question. So how does Zen practice affect, my practice in psychiatry as working with inmates? I mostly work with people that are in immigration detention now and also with federal inmates. The thing is, it kind of comes back to that frame, I guess, that you were talking about before, right? People get in prison and their frame is totally messed up, right? I mean, like they're not going to turn the corner. I mean, it's interesting because I think a lot of times this little shell game and moving things around the board and thinking that you're going to get around the corner or that this is going to build to this and it's going to get here and then we're going to get to that. I think going to prison completely destroys that whole frame. And I think in some ways, for some people, that can be a good thing. For other people, it could be a really bad thing. And you can't sort of bring Zen into it or bring this particular perspective into it when people are really suffering sometimes. But sometimes they get it, right? And I think, one of the stories, I like to tell a lot of stories because I think people remember stories. And I think for whatever reason, I remember stories. And I think one of the ones that I think about a lot with people that are in prison is the myth of Sisyphus, rolling the giant boulder up the hill. And this philosopher, Albert Camus, back in I don't know when it was, probably the 1930s or something like that, wrote an essay called On the Myth of Sisyphus. So Sisyphus, the short of the story, and this is a story I sometimes tell people if I feel like they're going to be open to it. The short version of the story is that Sisyphus basically pisses off the gods, and his punishment is that for all eternity he's going to have to roll this boulder up the hill, up this impossibly huge boulder up an impossible hill, and then it rolls back down, and he has to go do it all over again for all of eternity, right? But Camus, the philosopher, the existential philosopher, kind of handles this because one of the questions that existential philosophers had is sort of like, this is an absurd experience that we're having. Again, kind of the back to like, what's this all about? We live for 30,000 days or whatever, and we just keel over, and no matter what we did, it sort of eventually amounts to nothing. This is the absurdity of the whole thing. But he uses the myth of Sisyphus to kind of illustrate the point, right? The point that Camus is trying to make is something about um, the absurd hero, right? So his idea he kind of talks in this essay about like, Sisyphus is rolling this rock, and in the beginning, he's probably going through. He doesn't say this because I'm not sure Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief were there, but he's like going through like bargaining, like, well, maybe if I just do this the right way, maybe I won't have to do it for all of eternity, and then maybe anger, and maybe depression, and then eventually gets to acceptance, right? And the idea that Camus is trying to make is that if you can sort of accept your fate, if you can accept the situation that you're in, then you can kind of dive into it. And he says, essentially, Sisyphus makes his rock his thing. Like he basically just embraces the situation, embraces the rock. And the idea of the absurd hero, I guess, is like you're free here. You're free between your ears. You may not be free in what you have to do all the time, but you have ultimate freedom here. And even though the gods in this case were trying to punish Sisyphus, the way that Sisyphus wins, sort of wins the game, is he's like, you don't have me. You don't have me. Like you can do anything to me. I don't care. Like I'm still free, but the way that he's free is by throwing himself into the job, right? So it's like a pointless job, but you kind of imagine him getting up the top of the hill and then the boulder rolls back down. He's like, man, I rolled crap. That boulder's heavy. Like that was a good day, and he kind of looks up at the heavens where the gods are and he's like, you don't have me, like you don't got me, forget about it. And I tell that story because I think there's a certain freedom in knowing that things are going to be this way forever. And I think the same thing is true sometimes in meditation. Like if I'm in pain, sometimes I'll play a little game if my mind is kind of going nuts and I'll say, well, what if this is the way it was forever? Because the problem is if it's not this way forever, then what are you thinking about? You're thinking about the future. And I think the same thing is true when people are in prison. And sometimes I will tell them if I think they're open to this, the problem is that you have an out date. The problem is that when you're not going to be here anymore. And you can spend all of your time thinking about that out date and miss the only opportunity you have to like actually be here. And like every day really does matter. It's, and just see if you can kind of flip the switch and see if you can get them re-engaged with what they have to work with. Right. And it's not rolling a boulder. It's a lot better than that. Pretty bad, but it's not rolling a boulder. And I don't know. So I'll tell that story. I tell other stories, but do I bring Zen into it? Yeah. I mean, when I first started coming here, let me think about that for a second. Like back in 2003, when I got out of residency, if you taught meditation, you would be like, they would beat you out of town, like where I was. I mean, I was down in Noonan, Georgia, south of the city. Like if you started teaching meditation to people, so you had to be really careful, but I really wanted to, and I eventually did. Eventually it became a little bit more mainstream and you can teach meditation or Zazen, start to teach different mindfulness techniques. There's a whole field called acceptance and commitment therapy, which is basically it's really cool. But I mean, it's basically turning Buddhism into therapy. Again, I know, no, like, but like acceptance and commitment, right? The acceptance and commitment part. I mean, it's kind of back to the rolling boulder thing.
It's another arrow in the quiver.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that's kind of it, like what are you going to do if this is the way it is forever? And then you start to see that there's freedom in that space.
Oliver Dorfman had the same professional quandary, by the way, when he started. His word gets out that you're teaching meditation, your life can seem to, if there's something wrong.
Fortunately, it's not like that anymore.
Yeah. But I remember in high school, were you very athletic? Did you run?
Barely. Yeah, I was on the crew team in high school and college.
No, I did intramural, but I remember in high school we had to run track. You had to do certain things, and it was agonizing for me. First of all, most of the other guys were a lot faster than I was. But I'm looking at the horizon, like running and running and running, and it's not moving very quickly. Like running in a dream. So I learned to, if I look at the ground, fine. There's a ground that comes and boom, zoom, going by. And I think that's similar to what you're talking about. There's a story out of Vietnam where the guy was being tortured and he was hung by his elbows behind his back and in total agony. He said that at one point it turned to like a warm cocoon. He was hanging in a warm cocoon and he was fine. The torturing guard came in and saw him and flashed very angry and cut him down but it wasn't working. So there is something about that being in the moment in that sense.
Well, I think that's, I mean, to bring it back to Zen and meditation. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why in introductory classes we teach counting the breath. Because I think counting the breath actually refocuses your attention. So if you're sitting there and your mind is wandering, or you're falling asleep or whatever, to come back to just counting the breath. So, 1 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 10. It brings you back.
1 to 4.
What?
1 to 4 is better.
Okay. Well, 1 to 10.
8 will comfort. 1 to 8.
Okay. Yeah. But the thing is, it requires a certain amount of attention. It requires a certain amount of attention to what's going on, because next thing you know, if you're not paying attention, you're on 24, 25. You're like, whoa, wait a second, hold on. Or you're like, what am I going to eat after I get done meditating? What am I going to, it's like just gone. Like, but that's like, it's like sort of training wheels to sort of get you back.
Yeah.
Many times I have come back to just that, to just counting, or to like, what is this? What would it be like if this were forever? How would you handle this differently? Because it twists your mind a little bit. It like just gets your mind off of, oh my God, I hope I only have 3 minutes left. My leaves are killing me or whatever.
Jim Roshi had a great idea or statement in his book. He said, just imagine or approach things as if you had been aborted at birth. Every time something comes up, well, I could have been aborted, and this wouldn't be a problem.
The story of, it reminds me of the story of Sono, Sono. I always want to say Sono's like the speech system, but we were reading a book in book club called Dropping Ashes on the Buddha. There's a story in there about Sono, who was this wise woman. This will come back to what we're talking about, but this wise woman, and everybody used to come from all around and talk to this wise woman because she helped everybody out or whatever. And there are two different versions of the story. One of them is a monk comes in and asks her, basically, what's the path, what's the way? And she says, thank you very much. I have no problems whatsoever. And that's the answer, right? But the other story is that that some guy comes to her that's got a full life on the outside, married, kids, the full catastrophe and all that. And he said, everything's driving me nuts. My job, my kid, what am I supposed to do? She says, whenever you notice that you're having a problem, I want you to say, thank you very much. I have no problems whatsoever. He's like, oh, thank you so much. That's really going to help me a lot. He goes out for a year and tries this. And he comes back pissed off because it didn't do anything, right? Which is exactly not what you expect in the story. He's like, every time my kids were making me crazy, I said, thank you very much. I have no problems whatsoever. It stayed the same. Like nothing changed. And he's just like going off on this, this person. And she just looks up and goes, thank you very much. I have no problems whatsoever. To which he laughs and walks away, and something he gets, right? And in the book Dropping Ashes on the Buddha, they don't really talk about like, well, what did he get? Like, what was the thing? And I think it's similar. It's like if you can use challenges to bring you back to the present moment, then that was a gift. So you're basically thanking the challenge for bringing you right back to here, to where you're sitting. I have no problem whatsoever. It's not meaning that the problem disappears. So I think the guy went away, and I could be totally wrong, right? Again, there's no explanation in the book. But like, I think he thought it was like some kind of magical pixie dust, like, thank you very much. I have no problem whatsoever. There's the pixie dust. Now everything's going to change on the board. And that doesn't work, right? But if instead of seeing it as magical pixie dust, you see it as bringing you back to the present moment, then the board disappears, right? The frame kind of collapses, then all of a sudden, this is what's happening. So I tell that story sometimes too.
Yeah, a lot of the koan exchanges are like that. There was one where some guy had an insight experience, and he says, oh, there's not so much to Basho Zen after all. Not so much what? The Basho, his teacher, Basho Zen after all. There are a lot of anecdotes like that in the history that shows it's something we already know, something we already have, something already real. But, we're chasing everything else.
Too central, too close.
More questions.
One phrase for you. For you, why is 4 better than 10?
And I like that question.
And for you, based on that first answer you gave, do you find that inmates that have life imprisonment morality have a greater chance of freedom?
You want to answer?
4 is better than 10.
Okay. Does that satisfy?
Yeah, it does.
Oh, okay, good.
I've been interested that you use the analogy of a board a lot and moving things around the board. That takes me immediately to chess.
Yeah.
Because it's like mathematically, there's just this infinite amount of things that can be done on the board. Any particular reason? And I don't, I'm not saying,
And every single move shifts all that.
oh yeah, it's one move can just turn everything upside.
I talk a lot about kind of breaking your frame, or shifting the board. I mean, I think the idea is that we think, yeah, it was more like a chessboard, right? You think if you make the right moves, then you're going to win the game.
Right.
But life isn't like that.
No,
You don't make a bunch of moves and win the game. Nobody wins the game, right? You don't win the game by making the right. I mean, okay, yeah, I mean, there are caveats to that, right? You
Like-
make the wrong move and end up in prison, and then you got a whole different game that you're playing, right? But the idea being that, yeah, you need to see the board for what it is, right? And like, if you can see the board or see the frame, I think you can relate to all that a lot differently.
and you're also more likely to win the game further back you are from it. You start looking
You're still looking at the board.
in the macro,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you
If that's the game you want to win,
oh my God, I see what he's getting ready to do rather than some macro thing here on the other side of the board.
but it's a different. I mean, life is a different game than that. Again, people that play life that way, I think you can win certain parts of the game, right? You can make a lot of money, you can whatever, but ultimately it's not going to bring much satisfaction. I don't think.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe Elon Musk is really happy. I have no idea. What was your question again? Oh, do people that don't have an outdate are they happier?
Or happier, probably would be where you use more freedom, because that's the context that you were talking about it.
You know, it's a good question. In the federal penitentiary, I don't see a lot of people there like lifers. And of course, in the immigration detention center, all those people are not going to be there forever. So, there's a movie called Dharma Brothers. They taught meditation to lifers. It's been a long time since I saw that movie, but I guess it's a good question. And I think maybe, yeah, I think sometimes they are because they just sort of accepted that this is
So
their
it's
life.
just,
Yeah, I mean, I've got a guy that I see now that's in like he's in isolation. He's been in isolation for years, and by choice, he wants to be in isolation. But
what does he want to be?
I think he was a former gang member, and there's just a lot of gang activity. He just doesn't want to be part of all that again. He's sort of has given all that up and just doesn't want to go back into it or stabbed or anything like that. But
Isolation may be more interesting than other people.
I do think it's an interesting environment to try to develop. And you have lots of opportunities. Thank you very much. If you want to be in an environment that irritates the crap out of you all the time, and you always have an opportunity to come, if you use that to come back, maybe you can get more out of it.
It's interesting.
Or maybe getting more out of it is the wrong way to look at it. That's a gaining attitude, but
Outdate, like the jargon term in prison speak. Outdate.
outdate, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I thought you were speaking life and death or birth and death. We all have an outdate, but according to Buddhism, not really.
Yeah.
I could go on. I had an incident similar to the game board idea. Going to Japan in 1989, Oliver Bjorkston and I traveled together. He's a psychiatrist, and he was a Go player. He gave me Go, and he brought along the book, The Master of Go, and had me read it over traveling. And he explained a lot of things to me. I was having trouble at work. I had a boss who wasn't really my boss, but insisted on being my boss. Had nothing to do with anything I was doing. Conflicts of those kind, bad boss syndrome. And Oliver was saying, no, it's not you, it's him, it's not you, it's him, They said, well, what I recommend you do, and this is to your point, you're down here in the corner fighting this battle line, right? You're trying to win this little territory down here. The other player, the master player, is playing all over the board simultaneously. For the great Go player, the board is very, very small. For the amateur, it's very, very big. So you get caught up in a little skirmish over here. So he says, strengthen your practice at home, strengthen your practice at the Zen Center, strengthen here, strengthen there. So you're strengthening different things all over the board simultaneously.
There was I can't remember if this. It's funny going back all the way to like Tim Scott Peck. I haven't read that book since I was in high school, I don't think, but I can't remember if it was in that book or whether it was like an audio recording or something like that. But he was talking about how when he was in residency, he would stay late and he was working really hard and they were working on this unit together. And there was another person he was working with that would go home early. He would leave at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon and never finish their work or whatever. He went to his supervisor and he said, I have this problem, I'm putting all this work in and I'm doing all this stuff, and this other guy's kind of shirking his responsibilities. And, I feel like you should do something about that. And his supervisor looked at him and he went, well, you do have a problem. And he was like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I have a problem and I want you to do something about it. And he's like, you do have a problem. Like, you do have a problem. Like, you have the problem. And he was like, oh, okay. Like maybe the problem isn't, again, shifting the pieces.
There was a guy came into Dokusan one time and we had a week-long retreat a week or so before. And they said, there's this guy at the office, and every time I go in, he comes into my office and starts pushing my buttons. And I start reacting, and we get into a row every time. He said, this time he came in and he was trying to push the same buttons, but the buttons just weren't there anymore. So these two guys became best friends and got to be best colleagues at work. And so he was obviously doing something and reacting to the button pusher, right?
Yeah.
That was trigger.
Yeah. Well, then, of course, one of the big questions I always come to with Zen or with Zen in general is how do you decide whether it's your problem or whether something really needs to change? Because I think that's a big deal. You can end up in a situation that's not good Again, again, it's a sticky problem, right? Are you someplace where you need to change? Or are you someplace where something else needs to change?
I think it goes to the point of compassion versus wisdom, which is not time profiled in Zen. Being compassionate means you may become a rug mat or a welcome mat for somebody. You may be overdoing, you may be enabling somebody. You may be, you're trying to do your best to be compassionate with the person as long as it turns out the way you want it to turn out, right? But you may not be exercising very much wisdom in the way you're enabling or relating to this person. Not simple.
Yeah. What's the line? Wisdom without compassion, compassion without wisdom.
Yeah.
But like one of them leads to one thing and one of them leads to the other. Anybody know it? Compassion without wisdom is something, and wisdom without compassion is something else.
Well, colloquially, we say we can practice compassion. You can't practice wisdom, for instance. But you can try to practice compassion and fail first, and learn from your experience and try again something different. Maybe you'll get it right one day. So any questions over here?
Yes.
Great.
About wisdom and compassion, I was, if one is interested in having a friend in the prison, is there a way that you can kind of visit the prison and develop kind of a relationship? And do you think that's a good thing, or do you think it's just a stupid idea, or what?
We're going to try to do something here called the Gasha newsletter before I started coming, and since they can probably address them as well as I can. I think what would be really helpful that I know you can do is you can sponsor somebody at an immigration detention center, which is essentially prison. And if you sponsor somebody there, they're a lot more likely to be able to stay in the U.S. So I think that's something you can do that's really positive. That has an end date. Speaking of an end date, like you can do this for so long and help somebody while they're there. I think sort of the pen pal idea in prisons, I don't know that they really allow that anymore. I don't work in state penitentiaries, right? So that's probably most of maybe what you're talking about, and that may be possible. It's really hard to get permission to go into prisons unless you're associated with like the chaplaincy program, or whether you're a professional or something like that. They have like AA groups that go into the prison sometimes, and they have church groups that go into the prison. So I think under the umbrella of some other group, you might be able to get in there and provide some.
We got to the point where I told, wait, we had to shut this down because we were trying to visit 6 to 8 prisons and 2 or 3 hours on the road. Often you get there and the chaplain wouldn't be there. You couldn't get in. It was just becoming untenable. That's when we started the newsletter. But you can correspond with inmates. But if you correspond with them, yeah, by mail. But if you correspond with them, you can also be a visitor. There are lots of rules based on safety and security that you don't want to transgress, and that was another thing that was happening with the God Show newsletter. They were transgressing some of the rules. You don't accept a cigarette from an inmate because the next time it'll be something else. And if you refuse a larger request, then they will hold the cigarette over your head saying, "I'm going to report you."
The problem is there are a
A
lot,
lot of training involved.
you know, like my dad was always like, how do you work in prisons? Like all these people are like, you know, rapists and blah, like that's the assumption everybody has. And the problem is most of the people are just normal people that made mistakes, right? But there are some people that will do this, that will manipulate you. And the problem is that the small percentage of people that are going to manipulate a situation are going to cause problems in that particular environment, trying to go into a prison and be somebody that can support somebody that's in there. It's hard. Yeah, it's a hard situation. It's hard. I don't know that there are any easy solutions. You could look into it though. Yeah, I don't know.
They're like normal people, they will try to trick you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Like normal people in a bad situation.
Yeah. As an illustration, just check out the number of letters we're still receiving from prisons.
Yeah.
They have plenty of time on their hand. They have nothing else to do. And we just, it's very difficult to respond. We could set up a writing group if people wanted to correspond. We could have people writing letters to prisoners all the time.
We tried to. I mean, I guess we can talk about this. I mean, it would be great. The Gasho newsletter, when I lived here in 15 and 16, we still got a ton of stuff for the Gasho newsletter, which had been shut down for how many years at that point?
Yeah. 4 or 5.
Like 4 or 5 years.
What is the Gospel newsletter?
So this was like a newsletter that the Zen Center sent out to inmates that were interested. So they would write in, and then we would, you know, I guess write literally like a newsletter, but probably had
It
meditations.
started out as prisoner to prisoner. And that was what was unique about it. That caused certain problems when the people who were publishing it in-house were let out. When they got out finally, then they weren't there to continue it. So it just got to be a logistical nightmare.
We collected all the letters that were coming in when I was here in 15 or 16. We collected all the letters and they're like,
About
yeah.
400.
yeah, we had over because the stamps just to send out, basically we just gathered money to send these things out to see who was still in prison so that we could whittle our list back down and find out who needed it.
Yeah.
And we spent about $300 just in stamps. So we must have had 600
Yeah.
at the time. I think stamps were about 50 cents. So I think we had 600 people that we sent all this stuff out. We got like 350 back. And then somebody had to sit down with the database and call out all the other people that hadn't responded. Meanwhile, we're still getting more letters in. So then we're trying to cross-reference that and see, is that somebody that's already on the list, or is that a new person, and have those in. And meanwhile, we came out with like one, I mean, basically the only letter we sent out was one that said, we're just seeing who's still out there. And I think we had some information, like some introductory, information on meditation, but then it just gets overwhelming. And there's nobody that really wants to pick it up. We had one person.
So they really liked it. The prisoners liked this letter.
The prisoners want to interact with anybody, anywhere, right? I mean, of course, they'd be happy to have some sort of interaction here, but there are other organizations that probably do that already and probably do a better job of it than us.
Yeah.
So we tried to sort of turn our list over to them. We still get letters for the Gasho newsletter, and it's kind of sad, you know. I mean,
one caveat to what you said about when I don't know what you said, but when this one guy got out, he had gone all the way, and they actually let us do a discipleship ceremony for him in the prison, which is really unusual. And he had a group that was sitting with him. He was leading the group, doing his best, and he seemed like a really good-hearted person and so forth. When he finally got out of prison, he was in Gainesville, and he never once showed up at the door here. So it was while he was in prison that all that was important, but that wasn't he's working for a group that helps inmates that wants to get out. But he's doing good work, but it wasn't them.
again, I mean, kind of tangentially related, that Dama Brothers movie, those people were actually all on death row. So they weren't lifers, they were all on death row. But they basically like got permission somehow to like have a retreat and basically pulled all the people that were interested into some gymnasium and had like a weekend or like a regular session, taught people how to meditate. And then after it was over, they couldn't get permission to go back in again. I can't remember what the details were, but then all of those people basically got spread out and went to other prisons and started sitting groups all over the place. So that was pretty cool. And again, that's probably more what they need is a sitting group inside the prison.
Yeah.
Uh,
That was our thought.
yeah.
Well, the first time we went to Milledgeville, John Cooper, at that time you didn't know him, we're leaving. I said, well, John, we don't have to build any monasteries. They're already built. All we have to do is convert them. True. And they're building them every day.
And they're looking for that, so it would be nice. But I mean,
So don't ask them another question. Okay?
why too long an answer?
We don't have time.
Okay.
How about the question?
Well, I mean, I guess it's a very complicated question. But it has to do with, the discussion of like, compassion and wisdom. And, it's a complicated, I guess my question gets very complicated because it's like, how do you know or determine how to help someone? Because like, if I'm in a situation where, for example, like uh I there's someone that's going through hunger, that's starving, like I would like the way that I would that I my first thought of how to help them is to give them food, like because otherwise if I tell them something like try to be all zen and like, oh, you actually have no problems, you just need to be like a starving person, and I just tell them like you need to be in the present, that's it, like I probably deserve to have my head bashed in for saying that to someone. And
I think the point of that
and-
story was that you say, I have no problems whatsoever. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. And then you're in the present moment and then you're better able to be able to figure out how to
Yeah.
help them.
okay, so in that sense, so do you like ultimately, like, do you believe that in a way, like, so yeah, I guess as you mentioned, then in that case, what's important is to be in the present moment, and but help can should be offered in other ways than just like I guess all this meditation of stuff, because it can be helpful in certain context, but like ultimately, yeah, like I guess it's difficult. Like, how do you sometimes like determine what's the best way to help someone? Like, like it's complicated, and it's something that at least how I see it, you kind of have to take it like by situation. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts regarding that.
You have to take care of people. I mean, we have to have our basic needs taken care of to be able to have an opportunity to sit and practice and do all that. So I think helping other people get their basic needs met too.
Yeah.
As one who's gone through the medical system for other people who can't do it for themselves, I can tell you, it's an extremely frustrating, fragmented kind of operation. I mean, none of the committees, offices, or none of the agencies talk to each other. I mean, they do, but they don't take a case and put everything together for you. Talk about the moving parts on the board. It's like 25, 30 different contexts you have to make to get almost anything to happen, especially in Georgia. That's
Saying compassion and wisdom. Perhaps compassion itself is wisdom, the beginning of wisdom, perhaps. Having compassion, you're mindful of everything else that's around you and people around you and what they need. First missionaries came to starving tribes in Africa and tried to teach them, faith. They say, no, no, no. You feed our stomachs first, then you feed our souls. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, it's I think the compassion and wisdom are one and the same thing. That we can learn from that. You have compassion for yourself, you know how to treat others. you treat them how you wish to be treated. If you were hungry, you act the other way. Present.
I appreciate your hunger and so many people will come to your services. Feed
Feed them and they will come.
feed them and then they'll listen. We just give you tea and hope you listen, I guess.
I think the Zen interpretation of compassion is different. It's compassion literally means suffer with. It doesn't necessarily indicate that you do anything in particular. But as a psychiatrist, if you recognize that you too are neurotic, then you can deal with somebody who's neurotic in a more honest way. Right? You are also, if you see yourself as an addict, you can treat an addict because you see yourself as an addict and so forth. So compassion, suffer with, we're in the same boat. And I think the wisdom is to realize that you are the beneficiary of compassion. The universe allows you to exist. So the universe is compassionate in allowing you to exist and suffering with you. Some of us are insufferable to the universe and insufferable to the planet. And we're learning that. So I think compassion is a 180-degree flip in Zen. John, did you have something? This is a rare visit from me, so we want to hear from you.
If you don't have anything at the moment.
Some Buddhists have a preliminary practice that they do before they sit. One of the parts of the preliminary practice is basically to have gratitude for the fact that they're able to practice.
Yeah.
It's just what you said.
I'm just like a vow when we enter the Zendo, it's appreciation for a place to find.
Place and food and shelter and all the things that you have to take care of before you can even think about trying to do something other than change the pieces on the board. I mean, I think that's the pieces of the board, right?
I'm going to call him out by name. Kiko-san.
You calling anyone not raising your hand? Did you raise?
Calling him out.
Hello.
Okay, yeah, I don't like that when he calls me out and I have to raise my hand.
But Daniel is one of our new residents, everybody. Greet Daniel. Question, comment? And David is also a resident. Any comment or question? Bill, you're not a resident.
I'm trying to get somebody to ask a question.
For all the sewing teacher, Adrian.
You're going to stop doing.
No, I'm not. I'm going to stopping doing that.
Well, I'm not going to say.
Okay, good. Beginning of wisdom. So let's close with the four great vows. We don't use the bell. If anybody's online, they can hear the bell. Beings are numberless. Oh, before we do it, any closing comments?
Thank you for listening. Like I said, I was a little bit hesitant to do an interview. I hope there was some story or something in the middle of all that was helpful.
Did we find it interesting?
Yes.
Oh, still not doing it again. No.
You're not that interested. Being are numberless, I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Armageddon are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Congregates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible, I vow to enter them. Congregates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it.